Here. Good evening, everyone. Sorry we're starting a little bit late. We're coming out of executive session. But I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask that everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you. We have a lot of great information and things on the agenda to go through tonight, so let's not waste any time. I'd like to first recognize any visitors who wish to come forward and make some comments. Please grab a microphone, state your name, and would love to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cynthia Facillo. I am one of the supporters and advocators for Universal Pre-Kindergarten. I want to first start out by thanking our board of directors for all your time and dedication, and some of the board of directors that came to us specifically to talk to us more about different children's issues, and I'd like to thank you for that time, and of course to our superintendent. So I'd like to just bring up 5 major points about Universal Pre-Kindergarten. First point that I'd like to point out is the 10% return on investment. Research shows each dollar spent yields a return of at least 10%. Second point is the low cost to district residents. To add an additional 20 slots, the district cost is a total of $52,364. With that being said, it's a cost of 75 cents more in school taxes per month per household. At the same rate, we could provide an additional 20 seats to our children for just $2 a month. So that's less than your Dunkin' Donuts coffee. We can support working mothers like myself and other mothers here. The urgency of now is the last point I make. Children entering UPK in 24-25 are the children born during the pandemic. So Orange County and elsewhere has seen an uptick in the service intervention, OT, PT, speech. So we'll be able to, with UPK, detect these delays earlier and therefore save more money in that sense as well. So I look forward to hearing how the board is going to make the additional 20 spots happen for our earliest learners. And thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Brendan Coyne, 13 Paula Court, Clermont, Hudson. I just wanted to speak in regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am so glad that you folks are addressing this. It's so important to the children, to our students, of course. And as I said last month, it's also very important to the folks of Greater Cornwall. I've been very involved in the community for many years, including on the school board. And I'm very pleased. And I want to congratulate you for taking on this difficult task, and that you realize how much good you are doing for the community as well as your students. You know probably that many other districts in the area have already adopted such a policy, including Valley Central and Pine Bush. I cover them myself as a journalist. And it's a time, more than past time, for us to have it here in Cornwall. So I just want to thank you and congratulate you on taking this important step. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julia Dahl. I'm a mom of a COH student, and I'm here to support the district's DEI policy and ask that you vote to implement it. Cornwall schools, I'm an outsider. I've only been here now 5 years, but unfortunately they have a reputation of being really, really good for already high-achieving and mainstream kids, but frustrating, difficult, and even unsafe for kids who are religious or racial minorities, living in poverty, LGBTQ+, and those who have learning differences and disabilities. And that reputation's only going to change if we, kind of meaning you, decide that it should and take action. Embracing differences in ability and experience make us stronger, and crucially, it prepares our children for the world outside the cocoon of Cornwall. And that's our job as parents and educators, to create a space for our kids to learn about the world as it is, in all its beauty and ugliness, and to grow into independent, responsible, capable citizens. The DEI proposal helps assure that our district is in line with best practices to help us create an environment that welcomes and learns from all students, giving them the best chance to thrive and succeed. I was heartened to hear Board President John Edelman?
Thank you.
Edelman, sorry. I had Edelman written, but that's not what it is. Last meeting, reiterate that this policy is not political, but specifically tailored to Cornwall. He said, and I'll quote it because I thought it was really good, it's about individual merit and making sure that our kids who are being developed and educated and sent out into the world through this school district are armed to contribute to society. Hear, hear.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so with that, let's move on with the agenda. And tonight we have a special spotlight presentation. Terry, you want to kick it off for us, please?
All right, so we wanted to spend some time tonight just reviewing our year thus far, particularly as it pertains to Superintendent Goal number 2, which was around purposeful use of technology in the classroom. So remember our journey, a quick review back. We started with the pandemic and our oh no moment of could we actually stream in our buildings, focused in on infrastructure. Then we moved to let's make sure that all of our students have a device that will connect them, whether they're at home, in the classroom, or beyond. And then I talked to the board and the community and our staff about the importance of the devices, less than 10% of the equation when you talk about this work. It's really about that purposeful use of technology as it relates to the education of our students. So Megan and I, at the end of last year, started thinking about who could we engage with that would really support our staff in this work. And a friend of mine in Marlboro's Central School District invited us as administrators, so my cabinet, along with some principals and directors, went to a professional development over the summer where Mr. Eric Schinniger was the presenter for this workshop on his past work, his work with school districts. So when we came back, we got our feedback from our administrators, and it was a no-brainer for us to engage with Mr. Schinniger for this school year, particularly as it relates to professional development for our administrators and teachers. So Mr. Schinniger is here to kind of share a bit about his work beyond Cornwall, and then he's going to focus in on the work that he's been engaging in with us this year for this goal. Mr. Schinniger has written numerous books that are well received. You're working on one, or one's about to be published very soon. So definitely an expert in the field. He was a high school science teacher, a coach, system principal, knows the work from the classroom to leading a building to our work where I met with him. I met him at a conference, Model Schools Conference, when I was an assistant soup. So we're thrilled to have Mr. Schinniger here, Eric with us. So if you could come on up, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I almost said good morning, but good evening, everybody. What Terry did not say is that I was a non-believer in all of this. I wrote the policies to ban devices, to block social media, and at the time I lived in Staten Island, New York, where my kids went to school until we moved to Texas, and I didn't see any belief in technology because I didn't see the value. And I'm only here not because of what I did as a principal. I'm here because of what my teachers did. And we were the first school in New Jersey to go bring your own device 15 years ago. A lot of the stuff I'll show you today, we were doing that all 14 years ago. But we improved achievement with a population that spoke 40 different languages, 1/3 of our population classified special needs, a building built in 1928, and no money. And what we really focused on, as you're going to see, was not a free-for-all being on technology all the time, but how does it support and enhance learning for kids? When is the, not the right time, but the most effective time to use technology? So, as Terry said, I am only here because schools were visiting my campus from all over the world to see what my teachers were doing. And probably the proudest thing as a principal for me wasn't all the awards that our school won, but the fact that CBS Channel 2 New York City came 14 times to do positive stories on our culture. And I will tell you right now, everybody, I'm going to show you stuff that we saw today. But first and foremost, you have amazing kids here. I get to visit classrooms every week all over the country, and I'm telling you right now, your kids are great. Even the ones that try to give me hugs, and I say, no, 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 because, but I mean, your kids are amazing. But when we talk about kids and we think about today, the world is different. It is different. Many of us grew up with technology such as the 8-track, the Commodore 64, the Apple IIe, Atari, and now the technology that our kids have in their hands is the worst technology that they're ever going to have. And it's up to us to think about how do we help them navigate. Students know how to use tech for the most part. They don't understand how to use tech to support their learning. And guess what? Sometimes as adults, we need more help with that. But when we think about this world, I'm here to tell you, even though I love tech, technology is not a silver bullet. It's powerful, but I want to show you right quick how technology is not a silver bullet. Long live paper, everybody. I love showing that video because it's not about just putting a kid on a device. We want discourse. We want collaboration. We want critical thinking. But we do know that just putting a laptop in the hands of learners is not going to result in learning miracles. And what we want to focus on is how does it help kids learn in ways they couldn't without it? That's the main thing. How does it help our kids learn in ways they couldn't without it? Think about what all of you do with technology for your own professional means. There are things now that I'm doing with AI that is saving me precious time. But again, I still write paper notes. I still love paper, but then I lose the paper. But we want to make sure that it's not replacing ineffective practices. How does it unleash the genius of kids? And when we think about not right or wrong answers, and this was created by a grade 6 teacher, but I love it because it helps us focus on how does technology help kids raise awareness, start conversations, find answers to their questions, join partners, change minds, make a difference, take action, drive change. Technology is a tool, and tools can be used effectively or ineffectively. What we want to focus on is how does that tool support and enhance what your amazing teachers and administrators are already doing, not an add-on, not another thing they have to do. And when we think about, oh boy, a little bit of a typo there. But hey, on my technology, if I have my computer right now, I can fix that. So ignore the typo. But when we think about digital learning, creativity, effective pedagogy, feedback, reflection, collaboration, oh, now I know, it changed the font. I work on a Mac, everybody, and this must now be on a PC. Is it on a PC? Yeah, see? There we go. But digital supports all those things that we know are important. But what does it do? It can focus on higher order thinking skills in different ways. Kids can create things with amazing teachers that can demonstrate conceptual mastery. They can make the curriculum more relevant, contextual, gives kids voice and ownership, challenging, transparent assessments. And I'm going to show you what this can look like through the lens of your students and your teachers. But most importantly, it's not about efficiency. It's not about effectiveness. How is technology helping kids learn? Pedagogy is the strategies that teachers implement to move from instruction, what the teacher does, to learning, what the kids do. And that's the main piece. How can it build that stronger foundation for how teachers are teaching standards and how kids demonstrate learning. And after this slide, I'm going to walk you through some examples that I've been fortunate enough to capture. And when we think about the benefit, and as I work with people, the whole idea is, how do we show value? We didn't change in our school. My teachers didn't change until we showed them the value, how we're going to help them do what they're already doing better. Whether it's innovating the way we assess, improving collaboration, instant access, ownership of learning, improving how we use time. And I'm going to try to hit on all of these very quickly through the lens of your learners. Today, I spent my time here with Robert and his teachers. And oh my goodness, we saw amazing things. Amazing. But what I loved about this was kindergarten. Robert, this is kindergarten. This teacher comes up to me, and she's like, she starts to tell me what she's doing. I'm like, oh, I'll just watch. She goes, no. I want to show you how I implemented something that I heard from the last superintendent's conference day. I'm telling you, everyone, that is what any educator wants to hear. A teacher coming up saying, I'm doing this not because I have to, but because I want to. These are all the rotations set up by the teacher. And you can see she's got the kids' names. She's grouped them based on ability. And what you see here is you got one task on iPads, trick words, CVC, egg words, spring sentences, read to self, reading with the teacher. The main point here, one center involves tech, not all of them. So let me show you what I saw. And it's hard to see. You see two students there on tech, and you saw another one. That's textbook, everybody. You want to see learning going on. You want to see that talking. You want to see kids reading. But most importantly, you see the teacher and the adults working with those kids, maximizing time to provide them the support that they need. Here are some more examples. Robert, again, help me with the grade level here. Third grade? Okay. And great stuff going on. What you have here is these students they're all paired up. They're actually solving problems with a partner on their whiteboards. Then once they solve and they talk it out, then they go on to the technology and add their responses where they're manipulating the screens. But what's the teacher doing? There's the teacher right there. No tech, but focusing on targeted support, instruction, whatever you want to call it. Again, everywhere I work, different, but providing that support, maximizing time. Another great example. And you can see here, these students working together collaboratively, they're having conversations. They're talking about math. The technology is not driving what they're doing. Here's another example from today. And what I loved about this, when I was here on a conference day, I actually showed an example very similar to this. Meet with teacher, at my seat, technology, hands-on. So that teacher saw an example from a third grade classroom in Georgia and replicated it. Half the battle is, everybody, not giving people more work, showing them what other teachers are doing. And then the technology, bam, here was the choice board that the teacher created. And you could see, what is the teacher doing? Working with two students again. And then other students, you see them actively working, actively on task. This was at the middle school. And what I loved about this example is one of the benefits of technology is this is a tool called Nearpod. You see kids actively drawing on their screens. The teacher can access student work in real time. And through the technology, that teacher then can support the students in class right then and there, while other kids can work ahead at their own pace. And again, you can see all the responses here. I love that example. And here's an example at the high school where the teacher set up a task right here, and then students are actively working in groups, collaborating on Google Docs on issues that are relevant and pertinent to them. So I think that is my last slide. I just want to say that, these images are great. And when I was here in the fall and a couple weeks ago, people see examples from other districts. I want to tell you that some of the examples that I have, with Terry's permission, people not only in the country are going to see, but people from all over the world. And I'm actually leaving out of the country on Friday. And I mean, telling you, everybody, really, really good sound practice. But what I hope you took from this was you don't see technology driving the learning. It has purpose. The teacher is maximizing their time. But the kids are doing real world work that is more reflective of what's going to happen in today's world. And I don't know what happens next, so I'm going to give this to Terry. But I want to thank all the parents, all the community members, all the board members. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for supporting your kids, and you have a lot to be proud of. And I will say, because I see him here, his classroom, when I came to his classroom, one of the best math lessons I saw. It didn't involve tech, but all the kids were working on whiteboards, solving problems collaboratively. He was given real-time feedback. And I'll be honest, I told him when I asked, can I give you feedback, and we talked about it, I show that image all over the place, everybody. A lot of great stuff happening.
Thank you, Eric. Wanted, like we've said all along, to try to make this an ongoing conversation about goals in the district and things of that nature. So here we are in the spring before we get to the end of the year. The primary focus of this goal was really support for teachers and administrators. It was really focused on that, and that's what Eric has been able to help us with. So we've had days devoted with administrators to talk about how do you lead this work, how do you really focus on kind of what's next for your building, make Eric's feedback make sense to your building is what we've been impressing upon them. For our teachers, how do you make this actually practical so that they're walking away with tools that they can use in their classroom the very next day? And that's what Eric was able to show you, not just standing in front of them and talking to them for 4 hours about Utah. It's really, this is an example of how you can integrate this right now into your language arts classroom, and that's just what we're seeing at the high school, at the middle school, and at our elementary school. So we're really excited about the work. One of the key metrics in my goal for this year was, how do we know we're moving the needle? How do you know where you're going from point A to point B? And that's really where, I think it was 135. I got the feedback from Robert's school in my inbox and Megan's inbox of this is what I saw. These are the things that I thought were great things that were happening. Here's some suggestions for what you could do moving forward. So Robert has that feedback. Megan and I have that feedback to talk about if that's the case in March of 2024, what might we expect to see at the end of next fall and then into next spring. So we're excited about the work and thrilled to be working with Eric. So before he leaves, he's had a long day. He started here first thing, but wants to see if our board had any questions for me or Eric.
I'll break the ice and give people an opportunity to think up a question for you, Eric. Appreciate you being here and reviewing with Terry this technology initiative. I think it's a very important one to get right, especially, we're already into the 21st century by a generation, and catch-up is always a tough thing to do. So I appreciate you helping us get caught up, if you will. My question has to do with technology as a tool. You mentioned technology can be an enhancer, and it could be a detriment as well if not used properly. Could you give me an example of each where you've seen it used to, and we're not going to, I don't want John Hines to be pointed out anymore this evening. It's unfair to point out an individual, and it's against our policy to point people out. So we don't want to engage in that anymore. But can you give me an example of where it does work and work well, and where the downside risk resides and you need to avoid?
First, I'm going to do ineffective, or ones that have opportunities for growth, is interactive whiteboards. All right? Interactive whiteboard is interactive so that the kids can use it. A use that we want to stray away from is when the adult is using it as an overhead projector or something like that. Another thing we want to stray away from is students just passively consuming, watching a video, or going into Google Classroom and just accessing notes that might still be dictated to them. So those are some more passive consumption, low-level learning tasks that we want to move away from. Also, which I've not seen here, is I haven't seen kids off task on technology, which is in terms of their own devices, which is a real testament to the relationships that your teachers have. But when we think about, those good uses, as I highlighted some, the biggest one for me is how can a teacher maximize the time they have with their kids? How can they get that real-time feedback, whether it's from an adaptive learning tool like iExcel that you have here at this school and some other ones, where the teachers can group, regroup, target their instruction to truly meet the needs of kids that might need a little more support, but also to challenge those learners that are already getting. How can kids create an example that they understand? Where writing, we need kids to write, but what if they can draw? What if they can compose a song? What if they're more comfortable doing it on a video? If learning is the goal and technology is that catalyst, but that does not take away from the fact that we still focus on the standards. We go deep. We scaffold our questions. We have closure at the end. So I could go on and on again, but I think, again, the examples that I tried to share were ways that it supports and enhances what we should be doing.
Yeah, thank you. Brendan?
Thanks, John. Yeah, that was great. One thing that you mentioned that I thought was potentially really helpful for teachers learning is learning from other teachers. They're seeing really relevant examples of how to do it in a way that we assume these other teachers aren't adding to their own time, so it's very efficient. I'm just curious, how do we convey those examples to our own staff? Is it anecdotal? Is it kind of woven into our PD? Do we have like a collection of resources that teachers can look to learn from other teachers?
I'm going to start, and then I'm going to turn over. One of my feedback to all the principals is I model by creating these artifact libraries, showing the quality of evidence, because teachers across the country and leaders are like, Eric, how do I do it, and what does it look like? And I agree 100%. Your best leaders are the ones in your district that know your kids, that know your community. So as the principals begin to gradually release, the whole goal is to create those exemplar libraries from K to 12. That is your work. I don't know if you want to add to that.
So another great example is effective use of superintendent's conference days. So during our last one, early March, we had the opening keynote with Eric, just sharing examples from not only our district, but from across the country. And then we broke it up into by level. So the high school's goals are very different than the middle school, than the elementary school developmentally, where we are with what our focus areas are for each building. So that's the way that you can really assure that you're sharing those examples across all levels. A great example at the middle school is they have team meetings every week, so that's another opportunity for teachers to share with other teachers. Our SIP structure at the elementary, middle, and high school is another opportunity. What we're really trying to stay away from is you have to use Nearpod, or you have to use, because it makes no sense. As soon as we say you have to use Nearpod, someone's going to find something faster, more effective, something more useful for them. But when Eric says, let me show you an example of how I'm going to save you time, rather than trying to figure out who am I going to cold call in this classroom to see who's getting it, I can look up on the screen. The kids don't see each other's names, but I know which number is which, and I can key in on the 3 kids that may need to see me the next day in a small group. That's a time saver. Rather than collecting all the worksheets, spending your time at night grading papers, and then developing your lesson the next day, this is kind of real-time examples.
Thanks for the excellent presentation. My question is, if we were to draw a line, and speaking rhetorically, if I want to do a division or a multiplication with a paper and a pencil versus pulling my calculator and punching numbers, so how would you draw that line?
You bring up a key tenet of personalization, and that's all learners getting what they need, when and where they need it. What might work best for you as a learner might not work best for me. And that's part of the culture, is what is the most effective way for kids to learn? So if it's paper and pencil and that's going to help that learner, go for it. But if the students feel that they're going to be able to master that concept more with doing it on a calculator, I'm a big proponent of both ways. Because again, when we think about how assessments change and what kids are going to be asked to do, but again, we all know if we're forced to do things a certain way, that might not align with our learning preference. We used to talk about learning styles from Howard Gardner. Well, that's been debunked. But we do have learning preferences. And it's like, what makes you, like, I like writing things down because it helps me remember more than on my device. So I think it's giving that autonomy to the teacher, but also making the teacher and the administrator comfortable with allowing kids to choose the most effective pathway for them to learn.
Thanks. I just maybe like follow up. You answered the question based on the preferences of the student. Again, rhetorically, a student who prefers to use the calculator, what would happen to that student if he doesn't have the calculator?
So this is what I was going to add that Eric has seen kind of across the country. One of the non-negotiables is they have to learn how to utilize devices, period. Full stop. I don't care if you're going into career in tech, if you're going into college and university. The SAT is electronic. Our state assessments are moving to electronic. So even if you have a preference, there is still the expectation that you learn it with a device as well. The whole debate over what happens if I don't have a calculator is a very, very real debate that I'm struggling with. My team had an interview last week that hit us in the gut because we asked someone kind of a similar question of where have you seen effective use of technology and what are some of the risks that we might see moving forward. And this individual said something that's still kind of sticking with us is my fear with AI is that we turn our education system into a transactional system. I'm listening and typing into AI what my teacher is saying. Boys and girls, you know, we just studied the Civil War. I want you to talk a little bit about the pros and cons, and our students are just typing it into ChatGPT and spitting out whatever it becomes. So how are we really making sure that we're still honing in on those critical thinking skills and things of that nature while also not being blind to the fact that ChatGPT and AI is here to stay and it's going to continue to evolve. So we asked the question of what happens if they don't have a calculator. We also kind of asked the question of when will they not have a calculator. We're all walking around with a phone, so are we making a student do it long division just because, or are we actually getting to know the concepts behind division so that whether they're on a calculator or doing a paper pencil, they understand the function and functionality of why might you engage in a division problem? Why might you need to add numbers together to come up and solve a problem?
Thanks, Terry. This is my biggest worry about technology, pretty much. I mean, I worded it in a form of question, but definitely you see my point. ChatGPT AI, what everybody fails to acknowledge, I shouldn't say everybody, most fails to see the point that they did not create themselves. There are some people behind them writing the code. They can be biased. They can be set in a way to influence whatever, right? That's one. And again, I mean, going back to the calculator example, if I don't have the calculator, I can't do math. Education-wise, they failed me. That's it.
I would counter that because I think that I just went to a county board meeting where there was a presentation about AI and a lot of discussion in a lot of the districts about this is here to stay, right? So, and it's not elementary school. We're talking about what the discussion we have is around high school. How do we use this as a critical thinking tool? So that when you're reading something, you can fact check it, you can gut check it, you can look at it and say, this doesn't seem right because it's biased or it's not, right? So there's a lot to be learned in that space so that when they're out of school and they're using it on their own, we've given them the skills to use it wisely. That's wasn't what I was going to say, but that is relevant. I think what's so powerful here when we think about our students with learning disabilities, and that's, the train I'm on. I went to a conference in New Jersey probably 10 years ago because my child has severe dyslexia, and they were using technology, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I came back here, and with all due respect, it was like I was talking a foreign language. I just wanted books on tape, right? It wasn't much. But if we can get this in the hands of children young, and they know how to use it as a tool, then it's not such a stigma later when they need it, when they can't keep up with the reading necessarily, or they need a calculator to do the math problem, but they have the critical thinking skill to figure out what are they really solving for. So I just love seeing it being used so wisely and really integrated into everything, so that kid that needs it for full inclusion or equity is not standing out when the time comes. And also for the teachers, when a child has to do speech to text, or they're allowed to type versus writing, because writing's difficult, we have teachers, not disrespectfully, but who are like, well, they have to write, because it's this thinking that we've been always brought up with. And you don't have to think about that until your child can't do it, right? And so I think it's, I'm so glad to see the district focusing on this and using it really as a tool to help learning styles, because it's about the knowledge being transferred, not the ability to, just reiterate or teach back, report back exactly what you were heard. So thank you for the investment.
Christian?
I think I could extend this meeting by 2 hours getting into a debate about instructional technology, but instead I'll just share a story and just make an observation. I was once doing a tour with students at MediaCom, which arguably is the largest employer, and especially for a technology company in Orange County. And I was walking along with the VP for Human Resources, and we were having a conversation about this and what kids are learning and skills and things of that sort. And she made one of the most interesting comments, because it was kind of what you didn't expect. And what she said is that what we're doing right now and what we're seeing that the employees that we're getting is that actually they're almost too engaged. They're always supposed to be on task. They're always being focused. And she then showed me some research on that fact that boring teachers actually make great students and promote creativity. And the idea that when you're being bored and you look out the window with the Charlie Brown teacher, your mind wanders, and actually that's where a lot of creativity comes from. And I think that's an important thing about, made me think about what are the jobs and the skills of the future, even here in Orange County. And the observation, so Mr. Scheninger, I know I've consumed quite a bit of your work, and one was the Education, Innovation, and Technology podcast, and you were asked about what do you do when the community, board members, teachers oppose this, and this is mostly about virtual learning, and you said they don't know what they don't know. They have to be educated. And I'm not asking necessarily for an answer, but it seems like there's a different conversation going on with that technology, and I'm a little bit skeptical as a teacher myself and someone who's been doing technology about as long as you've been in education as well. And what I've become is more skeptical, and not just simply that a tech skeptic or that technology is not the answer. It's that technology is often as much of a distraction as it has been a helpful tool.
So just two things to highlight, and then I'll let Mr. Scheninger decide whether he wants to address that podcast from I don't know how long ago. One is example after example. Remember, Eric said, in this series of tasks in this classroom, one involved technology. The other one involved meeting with the teacher. The other one involved students sitting and conversing with one another. The other one, they were sitting contently by themselves reading a book. Same thing with the third grade class. Ms. Laux was sitting with 3 students while the other students were either engaged in technology or completing problems. So we know that that is a concern. So we've made a point of making sure that our staff knows that it is not technology all the time. It's how do you purposefully utilize technology to enhance learning. The second piece that I'll say is Eric didn't share it because this is his humility. We provided our staff with an opportunity to provide feedback, and our staff is not shy about providing feedback when it comes to professional development. And this last superintendent's conference day, it was through the roof with regards to positive comments about Thank you for bringing someone that's allowing us practical answers to this use of technology and the like. So I can share that with the board. Our staff found Eric to be extremely helpful and insightful, and that's the purpose of our time.
And I just want to piggyback on the fact that our classrooms are exciting, they're engaging, it's a new time, it's a new era. I can't even tell you how often I have conversations with adults in our staff to say, I wish we learned like this. I wish that we had the opportunity to learn in the way that our kids are learning. So one of the classrooms that Mr. Scheninger observed today is a self-contained special education class. And I challenge you to figure out what class it is on there, because the opportunities are so exciting for the kids. The choice boards that they have for what works for them is amazing. And what the teacher was working on, which is technology, was at her table with a dry erase marker, and the kids were circling 4 groups with 1/6 in each, because they needed that visual representation. Then they got their hands-on manipulative, and they used it in that manner. That's technology. It's exciting in our classrooms, and it should be tailored for the way our kids are learning, because when they leave here, we may give them a calculator, we may give them a Chromebook, we may give them a marker and an erase board. They have to figure out how do they make it work for them once they're out of our doors. So.
Eric, do you have anything you want to add to that? We have more questions, but I.
Oh no, I'll
on
remember
that,
my close. I'll remember my closing thoughts.
Okay, Louis, thank you.
Just a few brief comments. You relative off the heels of the calculator, we have fantastic teachers in our district. We have a high level of integrity here in our district, I'd like to think. It's about the intellectual integrity as well. That student may excel on that piece of tech, and that's where they learn. But somehow, somewhere before that, you have to know what to input. You have to have some basic knowledge of what to input. It could be a cheater's device and so on and so forth. But you, I believe, in your presentation are reaffirming the positive application of the technology in the school district. Thank you, Robert, for exposing your classrooms and your students. But I think in that that intellectual integrity is not something that poofs in. It's something that happens over time. It's something that's ingrained and taught from a very early age, and it doesn't just happen overnight. A quip. I joke and I say when I learned when I was younger, it was very linear learning, and A plus B, then C, then D, then E, and I call it survival math. The math that the kids are learning today, as a matter of fact, is math that I call survival math. I had to figure out on my own throughout my older years and how to make things happen faster and quicker and more and better. That these guys are learning. These kids are learning just 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. Cranking it out. So. Just in the end, thank you for reaffirming the tech in our district is coming together. And it's happy to hear that the professional development, comments are skyrocketing. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, and a few things really quick. Tech should not drive what happens on the classroom. Relationships, clarity and form of the standard, high effect strategies. But I will share a quick quote from one of my favorite movies, Don't Judge. The Greatest Showman. In The Greatest Showman, Hugh Jackman's character said, "Comfort is the enemy of progress." As humans, we are impacted by experience. We do many things because that's what we've experienced. That doesn't mean it's the right way or the best way. And the biggest thing is to challenge our own mindset. It's not about right, wrong, effective, ineffective. It's about understanding what can we do to best serve our kids. And I will not tell you what my students told me. But when I changed, it was because I started as a principal talking to my students, and their reactions were very harsh. But we knew that we were not meeting their needs, and that we had to work better to try to meet their needs as best as possible. So I will end on that. You're doing great stuff. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Eric. You ended up on a high note, and having a growth mindset doesn't apply just to kids, right? It applies to all of us. So thank you for closing on that high note for us. Okay, so let's continue on with the agenda. I think next item is the consent agenda. Oh, correction deflection. Thank you, Jim. Committee updates. Let's go around the horn. We'll go alphabetically first. Audit.
So we have, the audit committee has worked with Harvey to select 2 areas for internal audit, and he is working with the auditors to get that scheduled, hopefully to have a follow-up meeting in late May or early June, depending on the auditor's schedule.
Thank you for that, Jim. Brendan, communication?
Yep, we have some exciting developments for on the communication front. So we are moving forward with a couple of things. We will be developing a basically like a communication capital project asset suite, we'll call it. There's going to be a large display of a rendering of what the high school athletic facility will look like. And we want to, we're beginning to produce that now. That will be, we're looking to get a display version for the high school itself, but then also have that displayed at each school, kind of like you walk in and everybody just gets to see what, what's on tap. And to support that, we'll have the trifold with both what's been done and what's to come, just making these as accessible as possible throughout the district as people come into and out of the buildings. Then we'll also be moving forward with the typical budget season communication, budget newsletter, and then scheduling the budget. Typically, we do a budget forum, so that'll be. We have to pick the date for that. By next meeting, I'm sure we'll have that date. But you can figure it's always in that first to second week of May period.
Thank you for that, Brendan. Lewis, facilities?
So, as a historical reference, for the new board members, existing board members were here and know about it. A planning document was generated 5 or so years ago, or about 4 or 5 years ago, 4 years ago, based on our 5-year building condition survey. And that consolidated document is what drove the items to be selected to be in this bond that we're currently under right now in the work and the phases that you hear us discussing. So akin to that, the current facilities committee is so I should back up. The document was voluminous to the point where we couldn't afford it all in one fell swoop. So we had to pick and parse out what was of the most highest priorities that needed to get done, things failing in the district. B, money. We couldn't afford it all. What prioritized? Inevitably, some portion of that document was left off because, again, we just couldn't get it done all in one shot. So what the Facilities Committee currently is doing is working towards the balance of the original document, coupled with any rising needs that's happened between the last bond and today, things that have maybe been risen to the point of failure or needing attention in the district. We're looking on finalizing that document and potentially proposing this as a future effort to get work done in the district. Another thing that was broached that we're going to be focusing on in the coming weeks is the population increase of our district in our schools and our buildings. We invited in the principals of our elementary schools. Our middle school principal is a member of the committee, so she was there regardless. And we invited them to talk about what a population increase meant to their day-to-day operation, what it looked like on the ground with the teachers and educators, their space, et cetera. And we went for like a 3 or 5% increase. I have the information on what that increase is per student. We don't have to bore everybody here today. But in general, to float the idea, and the summary was that pretty much all the elementary schools were at a capacity to where if they imported or new students came in and they took on new students, that major modifications of the educational day would have to happen. For example, the art spaces, the music spaces, they would have to be turned into educational environments, and music will go on a car potentially, art would go on a car potentially, all things that no one wants to hear being, said, but it's something that's potentially out there. So the general notion of a district expansion / population increase, what would we do? What would we do as the board, as a district, just to kind of float that and get that pinned? That's on our horizon. And our next meeting is April 22nd, a couple weeks. Hopefully we can get this, this planning document kind of honed in a little bit better and have something for the greater board in the coming weeks.
Great, thank you, Louis. Just to clarify one thing about the initiative, which was somewhat of a scenario analysis, it was to see what would happen if we incurred growth in enrollment, right? And the assumption was a 5% growth for your individual building would result in
X.
exactly, whether
Correct.
sustainable or it would interfere with the current way that education is occurring in those buildings.
That's right. And that's a building experiencing it, not a district. It could
Right.
be an influx of 5% of elementary level students over 3 schools, and it's moot. Or it could be an influx to one area, and it's, you know what, you're at capacity, we may have to borrow another classroom.
Right.
Correct.
And so having this kind of a strategic mindset of what if, how scalable is the district? Everyone knows that the governor tried to reduce what I'll call foundation aid as a result of declining enrollments at various districts. I don't think that's going to pass, but still we don't have a budget. The issue that we're confronting is our enrollments have been somewhat steady since the pandemic, and our worst case scenario is what would happen if our enrollments were actually increased because the good news of Cornwall gets out and we have an influx of more students than we've had over the last couple years. How scalable are we? And the answer looks like we're not that scalable to the upside, which would require some modification. But this is all initial, but thank you for running that down for us, and we look forward to continuing.
Just to know,
info on that.
as a fact, CES, this school, is the one school that really took on a lot of students post-COVID. Everything was kind of sustainable. We lost a few because of COVID, people making their own decisions. And then this school is the one that really took the increase post-COVID.
Great stuff. Thank you, Louis. Policy, Jim? I know we're talking about 2 policies tonight.
Yeah,
but-
policy committee, you will see the fruits of our labor on the 2 policies and number 5 on the consent agenda. And then we are going to have one more meeting to close out the year. Still need to schedule that to just our normal review, that 3-year review cycle of policies. And I think we've got somewhere between 10 and 15 to tackle before the end of the year.
Great work going on in the policy committee. Appreciate your effort in leading it all. That takes us then to the consent agenda. And before we get into it, I just want to, for ease of everyone's time, I'm going to ask that we remove item number 5, which is the second reading of 2 policies. That's policy 0105 and 4810. We will discuss those separately as not as part of the consent agenda items, leaving us with items 1 through 4 and 6 and 7. Is there any other item on the consent agenda that someone would like to talk separately about? So could I have a motions for the items 1 through 4 and 6 and 7?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Approved. Thank you for that. So what I'll do for item number 5, just for the interest of time, is I would like to tee up the 0105 item, which is the new diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second? Okay. Discussion. Bass.
First question is, since the first reading, was there any?
Is his mic on?
Now we're talking about zero.
Hey, Bass, could you put your mic on? If it,
Sorry.
thanks.
Let me repeat. I'm sorry for that. My question regarding the policies, both of them. Now, John, you're discussing 0105, but the same goes for the other one, 4810. Was there any revisions done on the text since the first reading? I'm not aware of anything, but I just want to state that. Okay, for a fact. That's
Okay.
my question,
Yep.
but I have some further comments. I mean, you're discussing the policies themselves, right?
Right, just 0105 for,
okay.
for the moment.
Okay.
Any other question or comment that someone would like to make about 0105?
Yeah. So
Bass, go
what
ahead.
I like to say is that, again, I went on the record during last meeting with my comments regarding 0105. And since the answer to my question, whether the text was changed since, I would still object if we were to vote today. I would still have my my two objections that I listed last time. Now, my first objection was regarding the way the policy is written. There was a paragraph talking about the superintendent regularly reviewing and doing work on that, and my take was that that would take too much time on the part of the superintendent, that in my view should focus his time on some other things, because the way the text was read, right, I was kind of, hoping that the text would change, giving us as a board, a good idea how about the level of effort, if you want, or the time. I mean, any estimate on how much effort that would take on the part of the superintendent. That was my objection number one, for me to approve the policy. My second objection was, again, there was another paragraph, another section of the policy, the way it was written, talking about the recommendation that the DI committee brings forward to the board. And to me, the way it reads was that the DEI committee is going to dictate on the board what needs to be done, what needs to be changed. Again, the way it was written, and I requested some clarification, so not to give the impression that the DEI committee comes to the board, hey board, you need to change this. Hey board, you need to do whatever. Maybe that wasn't the intent of the way we needed to write the policy. But again, I mean, I needed some clarification so we don't give that perception that we have to report to the DEI committee as a board. I might not be here in the future, but the board in itself shouldn't have to kind of report to the DEI committee. All I needed is some clarifications that would not let anybody think that if the DEI committee comes with the recommendations to the board would say, okay, we're gonna do it.
So Bass, I appreciate your two comments there. Let me try to address that, and I'll turn it over to Terry when I'm done. But I thought last time at our meeting, we talked about the role of the board and the process that we follow on all things, and that process includes this DEI committee, and any new initiatives that may come out of it will always come to the board for approval, for the board's agreement. And so the board is not, as the document currently reads, delegating any authority to anyone other than the board to do what its role is in terms of overseeing and establishing policy for this school district. I understand the desire to prevent any kind of confusion, but I can't be more emphatic about what the board's oversight responsibilities are and how we're not giving that away through a backdoor loophole in some wordsmith policy that you may see here. In terms of controlling what people think, that's a fool's errand. I don't think anyone thinks that we should even be in that trade of business, right? People are going to think what they're going to think. And all we can do is provide people the best information about what DEI for this school district actually represents. They may think of a different school district in a different part of the country, maybe somewhere in California. It may work in California, it may not work here in Cornwall, and I think the committee has been very careful in terms of vetting this policy and providing appropriate feedback, not just to Terry and his team, but I think it actually filtered back down to the committee. And so what this document represents is the best effort today. Now, does that mean in a year or 2 or 3 the policy gets enhanced? I'm all for that, because we always are improving the policies that come before the policy committee and the board in general. But make no mistake that nothing in terms of our responsibilities as a board is being usurped by the adoption of this policy. In terms of the first note, which was this notion of reporting, I'm for reporting. I'm actually an advocate for more reporting, not less, but that's just me. I believe it's incumbent on the board's role as overseer to get as good and as timely information from Terry and his staff as possible. So I would be an advocate for more, not less, knowing that more information that is pertinent is what's required. We could get into an exhaustive level of reporting that would be farcical, not necessary, and not pertinent to educating our kids. And so I understand the concern that you have about the time that any enhanced reporting or additional reporting might have, but I think knowing Terry and how he's elevated the reporting to the board since his time here as our superintendent, I'm willing to let it go and see how it goes out of the gate and make any additional refinements over time. That's just me. Let me give Terry the floor, because I probably spoke too much on that. Go ahead, Terry.
So just as a reminder, and Bess, I think you know this, I worked really hard to wordsmith this thing, so I just want to take us back to, in the policy committee, I think there were 2 go backs. So there was round 1, where I was like, okay, I'll take this feedback in, and I'll make revisions, and then we had a second meeting where right there at the table, we revised this document to kind of address concerns that each policy committee member were bringing with feedback from the community and the like. So I just wanted to read 2 areas that we revised based on your input, Bass, which was, with committee input, the superintendent is directed to develop and implement a plan for ensuring the equitable educational opportunities. So not the committee is providing input to the superintendent, and then the DEI committee specific part of the policy says, the district will establish a DEI committee that meets periodically throughout the year. The purpose of this committee is to assist the superintendent in creating and implementing a detailed plan. As needed, the DEI committee will provide the superintendent with recommendations for how the district can better promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that was one of the examples of how do we really make sure that it's staying in board lane. And as John said, it can never get out of the board's lane. It's the board's role. And then just the last thing I'll say is our standard operating procedures. Just remember, this year we had a slate of all board members saying, like, what do you want to hear more about? Special education, athletics. That's going to happen every year. And then the board directs my team as, okay, we really need an update on X, Y, or Z, and I follow suit. So there's no way that this policy would circumvent all of that work.
I remember, there's a language where it says the superintendent will regularly report And the word regularly, I mean, this is my kind of, it's like, you know,
Regularly is a subjective word. We're not saying monthly, we're not saying every other week. It's a cadence where we'll get information back from the superintendent. But I don't think on any other policy we dictate what % of time Terry spends on any initiative. We trust him to get the work done. And I think if something ever got to the extent of being so out of whack, I would trust John and Jim would have a conversation privately that, listen, this is off track. This isn't where, the goals are focused on. But I think we're splitting hairs on words that don't really impact the overall essence of the policy.
Plus, regularly could be once a year. It could be, regularly just means that it's regular per calendar or per whatever your time horizon
and that's
is.
why I'm raising the point. You
Yeah,
know.
I
I
think-
asked, what do you mean by regularly? I didn't get an answer.
But to Christine's point, it's the language that we use on every policy. We don't say Terry will pump out a report every other Thursday on this, like
monthly.
So there
but
are,
it's just not a standard that we hold any other
if I
policy
could,
to.
just to correct the record a little bit, there are some policies that we do actually state, like within X amount of dates and the like. But
And they're compliance
but in general, getting back to the level of reporting that occurs, it really is when there is something significant to report. To establish a bright line or happy to glad in terms of regular versus
John,
periodic.
Regularly doesn't mean when there is something significant. Regularly does not mean that.
My point to you is something that is new, which I believe this policy is the first that we've adopted in this space, related obviously to other policies, of which we will talk about in a second. But I understand you've expressed your concern about the term regularly, and I'll just make note of that. Christian has a question or a comment. Go ahead.
So, as I kind of said, and I think this has been covered by several people already, this policy is a product of people listening to each other, people on the DEI committee, administrators, the policy committee, and even the people who I think disagreed with it or have issues with parts of it made it better. And I think that voting on it tonight does not end that process. And if we are serious about it, this is just our commitment to engage with it. And if it is to have an impact, the community is going to change, the board will change, staff will change, and we're going to have to update this policy and come back to it and rethink it to make it, in a sense, more responsive to our students, our community, our staff, et cetera. And if it's going to have any, let's say, impact, it means we're going to have to look at other policies, whether code of conduct, professional development, curriculum. And I think that, I look forward to engaging in that process, and I encourage, the members of the committee and anyone else in the community to come forward and be part of that. And I think, this is just a start, not an ending of that process.
Thank you for that, Christian. The district's policy manual, which includes all these policies, it all is a work in progress. And as, opportunities present themselves to enhance, refine, and improve, I would expect that this policy would undergo the same type of process as all the others have before it. Okay, any other? We have a motion, it's been seconded, we've discussed it, I think. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No nays, but we do, any abstaining? Bass, so you abstain?
Then vote no.
So just to clarify, the majority of the board has approved this policy as written. Thank you for that. I just want to understand, Bass, are you a no vote or have you abstained? Which is the equivalent of a no vote?
Well,
Because any vote other than a yay vote, I just want to understand for the record.
no more discussion.
No, but for the record, I need to know how to record your vote.
He
That's
wants
all.
to record your vote for the record.
Is it abstain
He's
or no?
asking for
That's all I need to know.
clarification.
Because, okay, thank you. All right. That would be policy 4810. May I have a motion?
So moved.
For consideration? All right,
Second.
second. Thank you. Okay, discussion. Christian?
This is a little bit what I said last time. I'm opposed to the expansion of this policy to events and activities beyond the classroom. I think it takes us out of line with what the New York State School Boards Association's template is. I think it brings a lot of different activities under the aegis, which is not even thought of in, let's say, the underlying legal cases and commissioners' decisions that are cited in the policy. And I just want to talk about one of them, like the Malvern decision, which was the case of a social studies teacher who included a letter to the editor that she wrote herself in the materials, talking about the racism of Jimmy DeGreek and his firing by CBS back in the late 80s, early 90s. And she was suspended. They moved to dismiss her because she included in that. And then it was found by the Commissioner Sobel at the time, which is still, I believe, the governing language on this, that they had erred and they had not protected her academic freedom, and that the teacher, in a sense, had the right to make these decisions, even to include their own opinion in that. And if we are going to vote on this policy, we should at least, I think, delete that, because we've gone far from that legal decision in adopting this new policy.
Delete which
Christine,
part?
go ahead.
Delete which part? I just want to track.
So in the policy, there are several different, like Tinker and Des Moines and Malvern versus
That particular
Sobel, et cetera.
case.
I'm talking particularly about the Malvern legal commissioner's decision, which was made, I believe, in 1990.
I got it. You just want to remove that case. I got it.
Okay, any other discussion on 4810?
So I just want to be clear, Christian, are you suggesting we change text within the policy, or we remove a reference that is made within the policy?
I think that if, we're going to vote on either the policy as written, and if we are, I think that we should delete that, because we have decided to go past that, and that's no longer the governing language by the policy we're adopting. My preference would be to delete the addition of that language, as I said last time. But I think that we're going to vote on that policy, I think, and my point is that to be consistent, it should at least delete that.
Okay, I just want to go back to my initial question. Is that language in the policy, or is that a reference that the policy is making? Is it like in the?
There are references at the bottom of the policy.
But it that's
and
wouldn't.
that's one of them.
So you're just looking to remove the reference, or you're looking to remove the language that makes the reference? The language that the reference is like associated to.
This is kind of like there are two paths. So if we are going to vote with the language, I think we should delete the reference. If we're keeping the reference, we should delete the language. I think we're going to vote on the language, it as written. I'm making a suggestion at this point, and my point is that we base our policies based on legal decisions, commissioners' decisions, et cetera, and we cite them underneath most of our policies. I don't expect that everyone actually reads them or, in a sense, has to live under them. But I think the point is that we are kind of going well beyond what we're citing as our sources, which kind of are completely contradictory to the policy that we have proposed going forward. So my point, I guess, it's an either or. We can vote it as it is, but I would suggest for the policy committee to go back and make, one of those amendments going forward.
If I may propose a path C, I wasn't here last week. I was one of the 10s who watched it on YouTube, so I got a good flavor of the discussion. I think we have support for the policy as written. I'm going to suggest we vote on the policy as written here without removing that reference, but that we ask Terry to send it up to Mr. Honeywell just to get his thoughts on including that reference with the expanded language and whether or not he feels it's still appropriate, and then we can take that up as a policy committee based upon Mr. Honeywell's analysis.
So help me understand that option C. Are you suggesting
saying-
we table this policy until
No,
we
I'm suggesting
undergo
we vote
further-
on it as written, and just as a back check on this one specific issue that Christian has raised in terms of this reference, that we asked Jeff, is it still appropriate to have this reference? And if he says, no, you shouldn't have it anymore, then we will remove it and vote on it again. I don't think that, I'm taking the educated guess here that
Can I-
Jeff's gonna say you can leave it, the
Can I
reference.
support option C as Jim suggested?
Okay, great. So with that, all in favor of 4810?
Aye.
Any opposed? One? Any abstain? Let the record reflect that 4810 has been approved, and that we'll ask Terry to go back, ask Jeff for some legal interpretation about that case and its relevance in terms of being listed as a reference within that specific policy. Thank you. Okay. So that then takes us to our second spotlight presentation, which is a continuation of the upcoming budget for 24-25 school year. Harvey, the floor is yours. Or,
So just
Terry, you want to tee it up? Go
yeah.
ahead, please.
So just to tee it up, John and I had conversations. We were going to be in one of two spots. Unfortunately, we were in spot 2 this evening. So one was the governor adopting a budget, and we would have some real numbers to look at the needs assessment and things of that nature. We are not there, so that would be a fruitless exercise. So in spot 1, John and I talked about the board being updated on, what happens if we get to the 18th and we don't have a budget. Just making sure the board knows, eyes wide open. We also want to make sure that we start looking at our calendars, should a special meeting be needed. So wanted to tee that up just so that folks are used to seeing Professor Sotland up at the screen, but unfortunately we don't have updated numbers, so this is really more educative for the board.
Thank you. So in terms of moving forward and able to give the board the information they need and be fully educated to make the decisions, we are going to have to modify the budget calendar. The reason for that is because we really only had 2 sessions left. We had tonight, which would be, we were scheduled to look at revenue, needs, and really see what we can afford and not afford accordingly. And then next Thursday, we were going to approve the budget, and that would be it. Unfortunately, we do not have the state aid numbers. We haven't heard boo from the state. You haven't seen it as well. There's nothing coming out, which is really not good. They're already a week late. I think that at this stage, we can try to hold true to the 18th, where we would adopt and approve the budget, but we would need an additional meeting, presumably perhaps next Monday, in lieu of tonight's presentation, so that we can go through everything. Now, with that said, if the state continues to not come to terms, here's what we're looking at. We still do need to meet on the 18th because we have to approve the BOCES budget, the administrative budget. That is typically why we also conjoin with our budget adoption, so that we don't have to meet 2 different days on this week. But we still would need to meet on the 18th. In terms of how much time we have, we don't know how long the state's going to take. We would have to make a decision by the 26th of April, which is a Friday. If, for any reason, the state does not come to terms with their own budget, we still have to adopt a budget. And what that means is that we would have to go with what we know. It's not a good situation, but I would hope that we would have numbers before then. Okay, that's just a worst-case scenario. And if you might recall, we were in a slightly deficit situation. We would have to go with that situation and address that deficit under the assumption that we would not get any additional aid, because we really, truly do not know. But I'm confident, I'm optimistic, and I think hopefully at the end of this week, perhaps there will be some breaking news. And so my recommendation is to keep the 18th and perhaps have another meeting next Monday.
So Harvey, to that point of having to meet again beyond or before the 18th, it seems conditional as long as there's actually a resolution and a budget that's actually been passed.
Correct.
Absent that, meeting would be.
The 18th, I mean, the 15th, next Monday would be moot. We
Yeah,
wouldn't need it.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. So we need to, not that we don't keep up with current events, because that's how we got into this conversation in the first place, but we need to at least pencil that as a possible date for us.
Right.
But my question to you actually is not about when we meet next or anything like that, is that you made the statement, we can only go with what we know. What does that mean?
What we know is that we would be going with what the governor proposed. We have heard things to the contrary. Yeah, the executive budget.
The executive budget proposal.
Correct,
Got it.
correct.
Okay,
Because we have not definitively had anything else.
okay.
Hypothetically, if the board wished to to address some of the needs and perhaps look at the tax levy, that is an option as well. It's just that with respect to state aid, I think we have to be very cautious with making any assumptions until they come up with a budget.
Right, I agree with you 100%. Jim, go ahead.
I guess my question, and I might know the answer, but can we not do this all on the 18th? It's because once we decide, you'll need time to work it up and get the language and get the resolution, and is that why we need two different meetings?
There's a very specific reason. We can do it. The problem is, there's something called the property tax report card that I have to put together, and the board has to adopt. Now, if we come to the board and say, this is what we propose, we as, the district, the cabinet, Terry, and there's a change, it's not just making one simple change on that report card. There's so much information, it would probably take me 2 hours
Yeah,
to
understood.
reconfigure it. So that's typically why we do it at the next meeting.
And that's a state mandate that you release that before we vote on it, so the public has the chance to review it and can come in front of us and make their comments, right?
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I can come with that, but it's based on our assumptions, and
It's too premature
It's
on where
very
we are
true,
in the
yes.
process we haven't discussed the needs list and
Exactly,
what we can do, and we
exactly.
haven't had that opportunity to discuss it because we don't
Right.
know what the revenue side is gonna be.
Right.
So, thank you.
Christian?
So everything, Harvey, I know there's legal requirements, but I did have a conversation with a senior staffer from one of our legislators, and their understanding is the education portion we will get what the governor's budget is. The adjustments to foundation aid are mostly to make whole the ones that lost money. And that is not and education is not what's holding up the overall budget, and that they plan to have it done by the end of this week. Now, that's not factual, that's just what someone said who might know something. But as far as planning and like what we might have available, that's what they think is what's gonna happen. And I know that they are up in Albany right now, because I was just yesterday, they weren't able to be there because they have to be up in Albany for this vote.
They weren't in session today because
Because
they
of
were
the-
released to go watch the eclipse.
That's exactly right, so that's why it didn't get done today, but it's government.
But they are
working
all
for
up in
us.
Albany.
So,
Do they work over the weekend in these situations or not?
They voted yesterday to extend.
Another
so
week?
basically a day off for today, but that's another issue. So as it pertains to our way forward here, Brendan, next.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on the point of the schedule, I think what you mentioned, what you outlined makes sense. We pencil in Monday, pending some actual news. What I want to do is ask you, Harvey, some questions to get us maybe emotionally prepared for, all of these potential paths. So let's say we the 26th, the 27th, the drop dead date, we pass a budget based on what we know. And then the next week, the legislature passes a final budget, it gets approved by the governor, and let's take both possibilities. We get more money in state aid than we budgeted for. That money is still coming to our district. What is our process to allocate that money now that we have a budget that does not factor it in?
Okay, so you cannot change the budget at that point. But what you can change is if you're getting more revenue, you can bring the levy down. So you're getting more aid, so you can bring the levy down to accommodate that. So let's suppose hypothetically you say, you remember we had 1.2% on the levy. I'm just making these numbers up for example's sake. Let's suppose you increase it by 1%. So we're up to 2.2, and that's how the budget's adopted. If we get more aid after the fact, you can change that levy coming down, because remember, we don't set the tax levy definitively until August. Okay, so you do have that little bit of flexibility there.
But there would be nothing to backfill programs, for instance, and say we're going to add this.
Well, again, if you increase the levy, you're bringing more revenue in. You can, remember, 1% is about 500,000. Okay,
That's what I'm asking. Like it.
Not after we adopt the budget.
right.
You
you'd have
adopt the
to-
budget, you can't say, oh, well, that thing
No.
that we didn't fund, we have money to fund now, so we'll do it.
Cannot do
It
that.
just gets reflected in the tax
Correct.
levy. And I'm assuming then, if the opposite happens, then we approve a budget, and for whatever reason, the final budget, state budget, gives us less aid than we thought, we would just have to raise the tax levy, and that's the only action that would.
We would either raise the tax levy, or we could just not implement that expense.
So you can take programming away, you can't add it.
I wouldn't
on the
say
other side.
take programming away, just not initiate it. So you are inherently, the budget would, the actual amount spent would be less.
So, in other words, you just have to figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, it's a strategy that we'll, as the decisions are made up in Albany, we'll know which way to go.
But for clarity, you would be if we got to this worst-case scenario of April 26th or 27th, whichever you said, you would be proposing something based on what is almost certainly the minimum of what would pass, so that this scenario we just described is very unlikely.
Right.
Right.
So that's the what we know is the minimum.
Correct.
If it were to come below that minimum, for whatever reason, the only lever that we have to address that, well, actually, we have three, I guess, right? You mentioned one of them. The other would be increase tax levy.
Correct.
And the third would be increase the use of unassigned funds
Correct.
as well, right? So we do have levers at our disposal.
You do.
But they're
not big
each
ones.
replete with their own dangers of
Correct.
use, which is important to understand. Okay, that's quite helpful. Christian, go.
A question for Harvey, just so we can't add things to the budget, but we can assign more to reserves in the future. That doesn't have to be decided by this budget.
We can assign more to reserve.
So let's say, for example, we have, some extra money that we got a surprise, right? So we have some
Okay.
extra money because of the state. We can still make the decision later this year or in the next year to move that surplus to a reserve,
Yes,
right? So that's not part of the budget, that's just a decision to take unassigned
correct.
and assign it to a reserve.
That's part of the year-end process when we have the year-end audit. Correct.
Let me ask my question one more time. And I'm asking it only because I came to New York in 2017. So from what you know, kind of institutional memory, if you want, does the legislator meet on weekends in situations like this? Have you seen this before or not?
Yes, we have, and it's typically up to the governor to call them into session, special session or whatever, just to get them up there.
Okay, not the best of news, actually, but look, the good news, if there is any, is that it's not as dire as one might think, and we do have some options at our disposal to make sure that we continue our winning ways here as it pertains to the budget. So let's just hope that reasonable heads up in Albany prevail, and we can at least go with what we know. And
So,
that's,
so are we penciling in a special
So-
meeting on the 15th?
yeah, so I think we need to do that. It'll be a special meeting. I'd like to have it done here, because it needs to be, I think, a public meeting. Terry's going to look into that for us in terms of the venue for that meeting. But it is contingent on actually having an approved budget from the governor.
I think we need to draw that pencil very lightly, because I'm forgetting the name of the state senator, but as they were preparing the resolution today, they made a comment to the press basically saying, we've got one ready to go for Thursday. So they're kind of already contingency planning to extend again on Thursday, so.
Yeah, there are lots of politics being played, I
So
understand.
I'm just saying that 15th pencil and light drawing with your pencil, not like a hard,
Sketch,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But going forward, I just want to get a sense of people's availability. Make sure that we can cover down on this. I know it's really, really important, but I know people have busy lives that are already like scheduled. Next week, meeting twice, okay, Monday, hopefully, and then Thursday. Wait, great. Okay, so let's go with that as our initial plan, and if things change, we'll be flexible and adjust as necessary. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Harvey, for that tutorial on these what-if scenarios. Hopefully they don't manifest, and we can just move forward with what we know. All right, takes us to our second round of recognition of visitors. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward? If so, please grab a microphone, state your name, and provide your comments. Okay, I'll take that as a no, and being the case, I'd like to then ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, meeting closed. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night, and enjoy the championship game.